So welcome everybody. My name is Elise Dewsbury. I am the Artistic Director of New Musicals Inc. and we are happy to host these ProChat sessions where we get a chance to meet with different people in the industry and learn things from them about being part of the musical theater world. Our host for the evening is our member representative and writer member at New Musicals Inc., Michael Gordon Shapiro. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael to give you the lay of the land and introduce you to today's guest. So turning it over to you, Michael.
Thanks very much, Elise. The lay of the land is very simple. We have a Zoom window occupied by Bobby Cronin. Bobby is one of these embarrassing multi-hyphenates who does so many things and does them all well. And for an interviewer, it's daunting to know where to start. But to recap a few things, he is a composer, lyricist, and book writer for musical theater. He has been a director for stage. He scores films and other multimedia, fixed media projects. And he's a longtime educator for performers in musical theater and of audition technique. There's so much, and we're just gonna be able to scratch the surface, but let me start by saying, Bobby, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me. I appreciate it.
So why don't we jump back in time all the way to the beginning, and let me ask you, when did you first decide you were interested in writing for musical theater?
Well, my mom said that when I was a baby, I sang before I spoke. So music has always been just something inside of me. I used to sit we had this tiny little den in our house that would have we were all athletes. I'm the youngest of 5 from Boston. And we would have all of our trophies and like newspaper articles on the walls. And I would sit in that room for an escape. And I would start singing the newspaper articles and try to find what I didn't realize at the time, but in retrospect was trying to find scansion, rhythm, melody with these given words. And it was just something that felt so natural for me to do. In kindergarten, I remember getting a solo and the rest of my siblings being like, why would you want to do that? And I was like, why would you not want to do that? And all throughout elementary school, junior high, high school, it just seemed something that fit me. So, we didn't have a ton of money growing up and we were so sports oriented, but we had a piano. And so I would often lie about homework and say I couldn't go to one of my siblings' hockey games or football games. And I knew I had about an hour and a half to be able to sit at that piano with nobody there and to sort of figure it out. And the easiest thing for me to do was to write instead of try to play sheet music. I didn't know how to read sheet music until a handful of years later. And I would just hear a song on the radio that I loved, and then I would try to figure that out. So I really learned almost backwards of everybody else. I learned everything by ear first. I would get, picture books from the library of where you're supposed to put your hands, and I would hide them under my bed. Instead of porn, I was hiding music books. And it was just something that was so natural to me. And I remember, I think I was 5 or 6, my mother did a performance, like a variety show. This was in the 70s, a variety show, or early 80s at the Catholic school that I went to. And I didn't know what it was. And I remember going to a rehearsal with her because I went everywhere with her. And she sang a song from Maine called Bosom Buddies with her friend. And I remember being like, what is that? Because I hadn't heard it on the radio. And she said, oh, it's from something called a musical where they use music to tell a story. And I was like, I'm hooked, like I'm in, I want more of this. So she introduced me to things like Hello Dolly and other like older musicals. Now that we call them older musicals. And I was really lucky. So I used to babysit a lot. In my neighborhood, I was the oldest kid, and then there were all these younger kids. And so I would write these plays and musicals and put them on in my backyard and use those kids when I was supposed to be babysitting them. We'd be like creating a musical. So in a way, it's something I've just always done. I've just always felt that music is a language that is so special. And connect with it. I'm super emotional and quite an empath. And there's just something about music. You know, I write book and I enjoy writing book, but I love composing.
It sounds like you are also a budding producer, since you're recruiting your
Yes.
audiences. And
Yes, well, it's funny because when I graduated college, our friend Mariana that introduced me to you, actually, we started a production company in New York City because we wanted an outlet to get our work seen. And so we literally started a production company called Ergo Theater Company, where for 10 years we created and developed new musicals, new plays, and we looked at musicals that hadn't quite worked in their first version and sort of re-looked at them. And I was always allowed to change anything that I wanted to change. I would always get in touch with the writers. It's interesting I brought that up because that's how I got really into the writing world. I was directing in New York City so much and around the country. And one of the pieces that we did that Rihanna was in was called Personals. And it was a big flop in New York City in the 80s. Like Jason Alexander was in it, and there was music by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz. And it was given to me in the mid 90s. And I read it, and it was the creators of Friends had written the piece. And it just, to me, I was like, well, these are skits. We got to find a plot. We got to do and so I, with their permission, Marta Kaufman and David Crane's permission, I sort of wrote a new book and brought the piece also into the computer age. And so what I ended with that, Stephen Schwartz and Alan Menken came to see the show. I was bold when I was young, and I invited them through email and was like, they'll never come. And they came.
How old were you when this happened?
26.
And how did you initially reach out to the Friends creators to get their permission to stage their work?
I called them.
Literally.
I would never do. It's so funny. I was so much bolder when I was younger because I didn't quite understand ramifications or of your actions. So I just was like, I want to do this. I want to make this happen. So I think I looked in the white pages and found their number in LA. And I got an assistant. I basically said, I tried to make myself look better, being like, I'm the artistic director of Ergo Theater Company. Mind you, we were $100,000 a year company, not like this major company. And I pitched my idea and I said, look, I wouldn't even really change your dialogue. I would just give it more structure. I'd move things around and I would send everything to you to get approval. And they were like, I mean, why not? Why not? And so I would have to fax every scene to them back in faxing time.
This is definitely a 1990s story where you're
Yes.
phoning people and faxing documents.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting though, because I think just them hearing my voice and hearing that I was quite passionate about the piece and that I thought that it had such beautiful heart, and they were like, I don't really remember that. And so when Alan and Stephen came to see the show, they found me at intermission. I was hiding because I was like, those are two of my idols, Little Mermaid and Pocahontas and Hunchback. Like, these were my heroes. Pippin, Little Shop. So I was hiding and they found me and they said, who are you? Like, why did you do this? And I was like, oh my God, do you hate it? And they were like, no, this is so good. I was
That's
like,
really
cool,
good. Like
thanks.
Stephen Schwartz imitation, by the way. That's exactly
they're both so kind. Stephen is just really great at helping people in this business. So at the end of the second act, and I really changed the ending in terms of like I said, there was no plot. So I gave it a plot. So when it got to the ending, it was this couple that were too scared to fall in love. And then they decided to give it a try. And just the way that I staged it and added music around it, people were crying. And that afterwards, Alan and Stephen were like, you turned that piece of poo into something beautiful. What can we do for you? And I mention that because that's something I've kept with me my entire career. What can I do for you? How can I help you? Because if I help you, then you help me, and then I help you again, you help me. And that's the way that this business should be. Like, I hate the competition stuff. And I was shown at such an early, like one of my early meetings as a director was with Hal Prince. And he just gave me the best advice, which was, he asked me what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to be you. And he said, no, I'm already taken. Who do you want to, what do you want? I said, I want to create. And I said, I'm thinking of starting a production company, but everyone's telling me I'm crazy. And he took a Post-it off his bulletin board, put it in my hand, and it read, if I had done everything everyone told me to do, I wouldn't be who I am today. And then he said, and I'm writing you a check. And he wrote me a check for $1,000 to get the paperwork going for the production company. And so I always hold on to that memory. Stephen then, after personals, took me to dinner or lunch the next day. And just, he said, so what are you writing next? And I said, oh, no, I don't really write. And he went, Bobby, who did the book? And I was like, well, I did, I guess. He's like, great. And who did the vocal arrangements and the music? And I said, well, I did with Charlie Alterman, like we did together. We found these things. And he said, Bobby, you're a writer. You need to go out and find something to write. And it's funny because with my company, we had done all these original musicals, and I would sit with the composer. If someone did this to me, I'd be like, get your hands off my piano. But I would sit with the composers and be like, that song, it just doesn't like sing. You're not, the melody's not going anywhere. And sometimes it would be respected. And sometimes I would be told to mind my own business and just direct, which I appreciate. But I did find myself wanting to actually tell people that I did this, but it was a secret. You know, in college, I was very lucky. I was able to do a major in theater with a focus in directing, and then I minored in music theory and composition. So like I said, I learned backwards. So my ear is still the first thing as opposed to the theory stuff. It's always ear. So I just decided I'm gonna write. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take Stephen's advice. And it's so weird how everything sort of lines up and happens together. But I was approached by a theater that I directed at before. I directed The Sound of Music there. And they said, we're thinking of doing an original version of A Christmas Carol. And for all you writers out there, everyone does A Christmas Carol. And do it, because it really helped. That structure of that piece is so strong. And they said, would you make it a play? And I said, how about I make it a musical? And they were like, can you? And this was 8 months before we were to open. And I was like, sure. So naive. I'm like, of course. Yeah, I got this. And I wrote the book. I wrote the lyrics. I co-wrote some of the music. I did vocal arrangements, and I directed it, and I choreographed it.
Was this the first musical that you wrote yourself?
Yes. Yep, that my name was actually on. You know, personals, I didn't put my name as a writer. Even though I wrote a lot of it, I didn't. I thought that was disrespectful. So I just put that I had directed it. And so from Christmas Carol started coming other productions of Christmas Carol, of my Christmas Carol. Other theaters were like, oh, we heard it went very well. It was, at the time, it was the biggest moneymaker the theater had. Which of course you cast local kids and it's going to sell for your show. But it was cool. It had a modern concept of starting in today's times, and these kids are awful, these bratty kids, and they have to read A Christmas Carol as their punishment. And as they're reading Christmas Carol, they go into the story and they become the Cratchit kids. And so they go on Scrooge's journey themselves. They are like Scrooge. So by the end of it, they've learned, they've grown. And that's something, go ahead.
It's not just a framing device, but it's actually the framing device becomes the story, essentially.
Yes, yeah. Because I kept thinking like, well, everyone knows this story. What can I do to make it sing, to make it interesting, and to make it appeal to a modern audience? Which is something I keep with me in my work. So one of the best things that Stephen Schwartz said to me was, so he had gone to school to be a director. And he said, and look, I'm a composer. And I always write with a director's brain. So my advice to you is keep that director brain while you're writing. Meaning, is it active? Is it stageable? What are they doing? Like all the directing work that I had, at that point for 10 years been working on, I started twisting it into a writer's brain. And I still use it to this day. And so then after Christmas Carol came this opportunity of, I came up with this idea of a piece called Brat Camp, of these kids that are awful and they get sent to this wilderness intervention program. And at first it was like a mixture of like camp and real and sort of like South Parky, and I was trying to find tone and all that stuff that as someone that at that point hadn't taken enough classes on writing musicals. I'd taken tons of classes on how to write songs, how to orchestrate, all that stuff. But Yale's program was not about musical theater. So I was kind of learning as I went, which I liked, because I did that with piano, with guitar, with voice. I started doing it first and then I got the training. So Brat Camp opened a ton of doors for me. I got a production in Chicago. It was developed in Chicago with some of the cast members from Wicked in Chicago. I happened to be in Chicago for a year, and it's the best way to develop, by the way. We would try scenes and songs once or twice a week. And I wrote the whole 2-act musical in, I think, 7 months. We did a big presentation of it. Then I moved back to New York and reintroduced myself as a composer. I still directed, but I really wanted New York people to know that I was writing. And I think that my upbringing and just who I am as a person started inspiring the type of stories that I wanted to tell. That as a director, you don't get that opportunity, really. You get theaters will call you and say, hey, do you want to direct Tommy? And I'll be like, sure, it's my 4th time directing Tommy. I would love to do it, absolutely. What can I do as a director to make it interesting? Well, what I love about the writing is I get to make it. I get to dive into my brain and tell the story in a way that like connects to my heart, my soul, how I see the world.
Sorry. Do you like the idea of directing your own works, or do you prefer to develop them yourself and then hand them over to someone else to interpret?
Early on, it made sense to direct it. As I've grown more and more as a writer, I tremendously love collaboration. I love other people's points of view. I love people asking questions. I love having to defend the work. I love having to, in defending the work, find the problem. And so I think that when you do it all yourself, you're missing those people asking the questions. I also know that there are people that do certain things in a way that I can't, that I would need. Like some of my other projects, I was supposed to have 3 different productions this past year. One in London, one in San Diego, and one in the Midwest. And I was not directing any of them. And each director brought something very unique to the projects themselves. But the most important thing is that it was the book writer. I do like writing book, but like I said, I love writing the music. I'm always in the lyrics. I'm very involved in the book. And sometimes I get a little bummed out when people are like, whoa, that book, that's amazing. She did such an amazing job. And there's a part of me that's like, I helped with that, but it's not about that. I know in my heart that some of those things were because of collaboration. That's what I like the most about musical theater. Because you mentioned I work in film and in web series and in audio drama. I did a bunch of this year. Never thought I would, but that was so cool. The opportunity came my way and I loved it, but I didn't collaborate. I just wrote what I felt like, sent it to them, and they said, love this, don't like this, can you move this, that's too loud, do that.
Now, on the topic of collaboration, sometimes you write lyrics, and it looks like other times you collaborate with other lyricists.
Yes.
How do those experiences differ for you, and do you have a preference?
What I like about doing both is that it's a different part of my brain. When my job is to interpret someone else's lyrics based on a moment in the story, I go back to being that little kid sitting in the den and looking at the words and trying to find the scansion and the heart of it and the meat of it. So that uses something different than when I'm writing my own lyrics. And sometimes when I do both, I will write music first and then do lyrics, or I will write lyrics first and then do music, or sometimes I do them both at the same time. So it's always different. In writing music with other people's lyrics, I find the job significantly easier. Because
do you prefer the challenge of doing
Yes.
both, or do you?
Yeah, this is going to sound totally snotty, and I don't mean it to, but I picked this as a career because it's hard. I picked entertainment. I love it. There's something in my heart, but like, I was fourth in my class. Like I could have been a doctor easily, or a lawyer. It just didn't interest me. I liked this puzzle of live entertainment, of making people feel things by something that came from my soul, and sitting there and watching people in a theater have an experience. There's that I don't think I could find in another profession. So I love the challenge. And in fact, I have a rule for myself that if I'm not afraid of it, I don't want to do it.
I've been keeping a running list of positive lessons that I'm extracting from your interview so far. There's a chalkboard right out of frame that you can't see. So what I've got so far are let passion drive your pursuits, make your own opportunities, and don't be afraid to reach out to other people to ask for help or collaboration. Does that sound like a good synopsis so far?
Excellent. It's excellent. And love the challenge. That's something I would say. I just got a commission, which I've had commissions before, but they were very specific commissions. This is we love your work. Here's a chunk of money, write something. So I've been looking at films and books, novels, documentaries, plays, to try to find the thing that really inspires me, that really sings to me, and most importantly, that really challenges me. And I find that the things that I'm most interested in, I'm like, oh, I love that. And then I go, wait, no, I already have something that's in that world. I don't need to keep doing the same type of work. I want to, like, to me, Jeanine Tesori is like a goddess, because every piece of hers has its own style, its own sound, its own colors. Yet you hear the song, and you're like, oh, Jeanine Tesori. And that's my dream, honestly. My goal is to every piece have a unique sound, plot, purpose, and what the audience is, and what which is the audience in a way, am going to get from telling this story. Which is why, so that first piece, that Brat Camp piece, it actually was optioned by Broadway producers, and I didn't connect with their vision for the piece. I wanted a much more multicultural world. I'm very, I have a lot of dichotomies as a human being, which I love. At first I didn't. I always felt weird and different. And then I've just learned to embrace that uniqueness, that weird and different quality. I was someone that grew up in an environment that was, for its time period, quite narrow-minded and bordering on racist. And when I got to college, I became the first white guy ever in my singing group, my a cappella singing group. And it was the first day of school, we had to watch all these a cappella groups, and this one group walked on with dignity and poise, and they sang from their souls, and they did a song by Sweet Honey and the Rock, and I had never heard it. I just was mesmerized. And I turned to my roommate, who I just met that day, and said, I'm going to be in that group. And he looked at me and he said, I don't think you can, because there were no white singers in the group. And I said, no, I have to. And then they sang Amen, We Shall Overcome. And I found that I was like on the verge of tears, and something inside of me was yearning to learn. And I find that learning is by being with people that aren't the same as you. And so I had a very different growth path than most of my siblings. Even in like 4th grade, I remember asking if my friend could come home, and it was the one Black kid in school. And it was like a shock to the white Irish Catholic town. And to me, it was just like, well, he's just my friend. And so that's something that I've always kept in my writing. And even as a director, I've always been someone that, like, I don't want to cast the girl that has the perfect body and the blonde hair. I find that boring. So the type of work that I navigate toward as well is something that is not the white experience, because I don't think I had that experience. I was also a closeted gay boy that was afraid of being who he was. So I like to tell stories that live in that where, like, the outsider, the underdog, which of course makes great musical theater. You know, Elphaba, she's one of my favorite characters. And I think the reason that show is so popular, no pun intended, or pun intended, is that everyone has felt green in their time, in their life. Whether you're gorgeous, tall, short, white, black, yellow, whatever, we all have felt what she feels at some point in that journey. And that's what really calls to me as an artist. So in looking at pieces, looking at some pieces from the late 90s and the early 2000s, and I say to the producer that offered me this, I like this property, but it is so white, and I don't want to tell that story.
Did they do a double take when you said that?
Well, what's cool is that he's young, and I find that the younger producers are really on the same page as me, whereas some of the producers from that Brat Camp, they were not on the same page with me. And I just didn't want to go down that path. Like, I had my first big idea. So through the personals piece, a major Broadway producer came to see it. I went and met, he loved what I did, went and met with him, and he said, I want you to pitch me an idea, a musical idea that's yours, and then we'll create it. And so I pitched this idea of a boy who dreams of playing Annie. And he finds out this day in the opening number that the town is going to be putting on a production of Annie to save it, old cliche stuff, right? And he goes to the audition in a dress because he wants the part. And a photo is taken of him and it goes viral, and he's sent away. And that idea came from I was walking on the beach in Maine, and I watched this little boy do a cartwheel. He was playing with his dad. He did a cartwheel, and I watched the dad pull his arm and say, boys, don't do that. And something inside me yelled, and I was just in shock, and I just kept walking, and that it just didn't leave my head, that experience. And I started thinking, why did that happen? That happened because that boy had this desire to do something that he thought was right. And then someone told him it was wrong. And I started playing with that idea in my head of, when is it that you lose your innocence? When is it that you stop doing the things that you actually want to do because it's correct? And pitched this idea. It was another thing. We got a team. I wrote a lot of the piece, so I was on as a writer as well. And we got option for Broadway, and no theaters would take it, because this was like 2007. Fast forward 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, people took that story and ran with it. And there are now films about it and other, not that they stole my idea, but the idea of a boy doing something that he thinks is right. And
I immediately think of Billy Elliot, which
Sure.
seems to have a parallel kind of theme.
yes,
That you'd think that given that that was welcomed on Broadway and the West End, that there wouldn't have been resistance to a project that seems
right, but that was
spiritually-
later.
yeah.
That was later. And it was also Elton John. You know, that's a hard thing, is that unless you're, and I've been told, even if you're a large name composer, it's just this, productions are so expensive and risk is huge. So one of the things this commission producer said was, it would be really great if we got something that was an actual title.
Meaning a pre-existing property that people had a vested interest in.
Yep. I did remind him that original musicals win Tony Awards. And he said, yeah, that's good and all, but you know.
Now, when did this conversation take place so I can place
Recently.
it on the, so this
Very
is a fairly
recently.
recent occurrence.
Mhm.
Right on.
Yep. And it's something like my agents have been for a while. So one of my big pieces that is done very well and was supposed to have a production this past year, and it will hopefully again soon, not soon, but to come, is an adaptation of Mary and Max, which is a film, a claymation film. And I stumbled upon that film. A friend said, Bobby, you have to watch this. It's you. Like it is it's everything about you is in this film. I was like, what are you talking about? And they said, it even sounds like you. The music sounds like you. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna watch this. I didn't know it was claymation. So I started watching it and I was like, oh, this is dumb. What is this? And within 3 seconds or 3 minutes, I was like riveted. And it got to the end. I'm crying my eyes out, texting my agent saying, I found the film. I found the film that you've been pushing me to make into a musical. It's called Mary and Max. And he texted me back. He's like, never heard of it. And I said, watch it. I think we could create a new type of musical theater with this. It was one of those things, I just saw it in my head and my gut was like screaming, it's this, do this. You can write this. It's a lot about loss and longing. My father was really, really sick at the time. I knew he was going to die shortly. So I knew that I could like channel so much into it.
Now, to contextualize this for our audience, Mary and Max is a feature-length claymation movie, is that right?
Correct.
And it has, there's some real talent, some kind of top-tier voice talent in it, like Philip Seymour Hoffman
And
does a
Toni
voice.
Collette. Mm-hmm.
And the basic premise is it's about a correspondence in the pre-email era.
Correct. In the
between-
1970s.
Okay, so the 70s, so way before there was any kind of meaningful electronic communication available to the public. And you've got a girl in Australia
Yep.
with a birth defect, like a scar that makes
Yep.
her embarrassed.
Yep,
Well,
she's
I'll let
8.
you take it, since this is now your plot as well. So
So-
run us through the premise.
Sure. It's an 8-year-old girl in Australia who has a really crappy life, a drunk mom, a distant father. She's very curious and no one will answer any of her questions. And she, while out shopping with her mom, which means stealing, her mom would steal and little Mary would stand guard. Mary got distracted and found a phone book and was looking through the phone book and found this name that she just thought was really interesting, Max Horowitz. And her mom gets caught and rips the page out and gets home and decides to write him a letter and maybe have a pen pal, because that was really big in the 70s, pen pals. So she writes to this man and we meet Max, and he's a 44-year-old morbidly obese Jewish man in New York City who, as we go along in the journey, discover he has Asperger's. And it is truly just the story of their friendship and the need for connection and putting off doing things and the danger of putting off trying to achieve your goals. And just the way that it was told, it was just so special, and it was dark humor, which is very me. And I cried so much at the end. I just felt so much for these characters and I just wanted to bring them to life. And so we tried to get the rights. We were repeatedly told no, that they're just not interested. And my agent and I, we just wouldn't give up. And so I started writing a few songs and got a book writer on board, Crystal Skillman. And I just picked a few places that I thought sang, like really sang. Those 3 songs are still in the show. And so I sent them to Adam Elliott, who wrote, directed, did all the claymation, stop time claymation, sent it to him. He listened and he really liked it and decided to Skype with me. And I cried on the Skype call with him. I just felt so connected to the piece. And it's weird because I have an amazing relationship with my mom. My mom is not an alcoholic. She's never had alcohol in my life. It was the character, but I felt so connected to Mary, this girl that just felt so lonely in the world. And I also felt with Max of a guy who felt confused by the way people behave in the world and didn't understand why honesty is wrong. These like very simple elements I just really connected with. And my father had pretty bad obsessive compulsive disorder that got worse and worse as he got older. And Max has that as well. And so I just really felt like I understood this world. And so I cried to Adam about all this stuff. And we finished talking and he said, yes, you're the guy. I trust you can do this. And then he passed me off to the actual rights holder. And that was a tough conversation, but we convinced her. And they've been incredible ever since.
So tell us what's happened to the show since you conceived of it.
Sure. So the film uses a narrator, a voiceover narrator. And when I brought Crystal in, one of the first things she said was, let's have no narrator. Let's just try to move the action forward. And we did that. And, people really loved the music. They loved the story. At our first full 29-hour reading at intermission, we got a production offer, which was like the dream. Now, this is not my first musical. This is now like my 6th or 7th. And it's the first time that has happened. And we said yes. It was Theatre Calgary. It was this gorgeous theater, huge, bigger than a Broadway house. And, we hadn't really like workshopped the show. And we got into rehearsal and I just started noticing that some things just weren't working. And once we got on stage, I was like, whoa, that this stage is so big and everything's so dark. And so it just wasn't quite working, which is one of the reasons we said yes to the production was it was so far away. And we knew that if it was an amazing, we got good to mixed reviews. One great review, one review. And we thought, cool, that's great. We got so much out of this. We made a lot of money. The show won awards. The actors won awards. Like, great, this is exactly what we wanted. And most importantly, we learned. As soon as we opened, I pitched to Crystal a narrator. I said, I think we have to have someone telling the story to somebody else, not the audience, but to somebody else for a reason. And that it's modern, that we're in a modern time. He starts telling the story and the world of Mary and Max opens up into this like magical, cartoony world so that the realism, the groundedness of the piece is in this sort of framing device. And Crystal was like, oh, kind of like Princess Bride.
I was going to say the exact thing.
I was like, exactly, let's take that trope and let's run with it. And we did, and oh my God, we were able to like truncate the first act by like 20 pages. Like it was just incredible how fast we could get places because we had a man that could tell us stuff instead of us having to try to move the story forward. And most importantly, we didn't have to put all the sort of onus on Mary and Max. I found in Canada that they were just on stage so much that I needed a break from them. So that when I would come back to them, I'd be like, oh yeah, Mary, oh, where is she now? What's going on with her? And we were able to, with this new, and so basically the framing device is a man named character is only named Father. Is it starts and there are all these guests in black suits, and they're milling about, and you can tell something is dark going on, and you see him looking around, and then finally he is at a door that says Lily, and there's like a picture of Trump with his face crossed out, and then there's Greta Thunberg's picture on there. So she's 13 years old and quite political and outspoken, and she's locked herself in the room, and he's trying to get her out. And what we learn is the reason he's trying to get her out is that it's her mom's funeral and the father's wife's funeral that day, and she doesn't want to come out. Mary and Max is so much about death that this just made sense. It's the other thing, as I said, when I saw the film, it was clear my father was not well. And so death was just looming over me. And so I just, this concept made so much, and then since my father died in 2012, and then I saw the world very differently. And so I thought, what if this is about like how we cope with death? And he's telling her the story, not just to get her out, but to have her understand that death is like a part of life that is, it keeps going on, and that we have to get through it, and that he's going to try to help her get through it. And he decides, since she's going to lock herself in a room, that he's going to tell her a story. And she's like, oh, and he's like a very well-known writer. She's like, what is this, one of your stupid stories? And he's like, actually, no, I didn't write this. And so I don't want to give too much away, but as the journey goes on, we learn who he is, and we learn his connection into the story. And the cool thing is that we never see Lily in the first act at all. She plays young Mary. And we don't know that till the very last second of Act 1, when she finally opens the door and we see, oh my God, it's the same actor that was playing the young girl in the Mary and Max story, because she starts out at 8. So we did a lot of these, I hate the word meta, but like these meta on top of meta on top of meta things. And the ending of the piece in Canada, people were angry, like audibly angry. We ended it exactly how it ends in the film. But in theater, we need a little more hope. So we now have like the timelines all like interweaving, and Mary is sitting down at Max's typewriter that he wrote all of his letters to her, and she starts writing the book, Mary and Max, which is the book that the father has read to the girl through the whole piece. So like and we did a production in Austria in the very end of 2019.
And this is the reworked version?
The reworked version.
Got it.
Again, without workshops, so we were nervous, but oh my God, it was a mega hit. Like a mega hit. The reviews were something I've dreamed of my entire life. And not that reviews matter, but when you get a bad one, you're hoping for a good one. And these were all just great. They understood what we were doing. Austrian European audiences aren't really big on standing ovations. We had a 5-minute standing ovation opening night. Something I will never forget, that feeling. It was just the greatest, just all that hard work and all the, sometimes everyone has the post-production like letdown. I didn't have it because I was so satisfied with it. German publishers came, and the show is now getting published in the German language that it was translated into. We just got optioned by Broadway producers, in fact, on Wednesday. And so we're going to be moving ahead we're actually probably going to go to London first.
Fantastic.
And yeah. And so, that piece was such a journey from, just seeing this film to at first wanting to pick it because no one knew it. But what I found is that a lot of people know it. It's sort of like a culty piece, and people are really taken by it. It has great scores on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like a really well-reviewed film, well-respected film. It didn't play in America because it was so dark. And so, one of the reasons to go through all this is, as I'm looking at properties now, the thing that I keep asking myself is, does this sing? Does this need to sing? Do we need to tell this story in a musical fashion? What do we get from doing that? And then another thing I think a lot about is, does it already have like a major star in the film that we associate with? Because that I just think you can never take away. I just
So that
think
influences how you interpret the
right, which is what I loved about Mary and Max. They were cartoons, so we could make them into whatever we wanted to, and then crafting this sort of framing device and creating two characters. We just added so much to it that yes, it's an adaptation of the film, but it's not the film on stage. It is truly an adaptation of the film.
Now we are starting to face the unfortunate constraints of time limits. So I'm going to cattle prod us forward a little bit. There are a number of really impressive commissions on your resume that we won't have time to discuss. But in light of your success in getting commissions and in being produced, which are the twin holy grails, I think, of a musical theater composer, can you offer any encouragement or practical advice to up-and-coming musical theater creators who would love to tap into that kind of success? What in your background do you think really helped that other people could emulate? And then maybe what lessons have you just run into along the way that you think would be practical advice for someone trying to achieve similar success?
Yeah, I think the thing that helped launch my career early on was YouTube. I would do so many concerts in the city just to get my work out there. I just wanted people to hear it. Now, it ended up backfiring sometimes, where people thought, oh, he writes great songs. Do you write musicals? I'm like, what do you think these songs are from? But I found that people aren't as intelligent as we hope. You have to spoon feed a bit. So I would always make sure that I would put on anything that went on YouTube what the show was, that it was from a live concert, but the song is from a show. The reason I mention that is I think TikTok is the place right now. And I'm going to be honest about what I'm about to say. I don't like it. However, it's super useful. And so that's what I would say to answer your question, like find a way to get your stuff out there. And there are many ways. TikTok, Instagram, social media is a gift. It's really a gift. I was really, super fast story. I was really lucky. Casey Levy, who's a major Broadway star, was one of the first people that ever sang my material. She was an unknown, even though she had had a couple of Broadway shows under her belt, but she hadn't had a starring role yet. She recorded a video of my song, Dear Daddy. It did okay for a bit on YouTube. Then she became Alphaba. Then she became the lead in Hair. Then she became the lead in Ghost. Then she became the lead in Les Mis. Then she became the lead in Frozen. And that song has sold so much sheet music. It gets used at competitions for kids, and because it's sung by a teenager. And so that's how some people would have known my name just from that one song. But what's amazing is Casey actually got Ghost from that video.
Wow.
She had gone in for her audition, and I guess she didn't, they didn't see it at that moment. And then they saw her at the opening night of Hair in London. And at intermission, they were like, I think we made a mistake. One of the casting directors pulled up her singing Dear Daddy. They watched it. They then sent it to the writers of the musical, and everyone was like, that's her, that's Molly. And she got it.
So it's interesting how this reflects your philosophy of offering something to people, helping other people, and in return, letting them help you, because you gave some killer audition number, and she in turn has really popularized your song and brought your name. So I feel like we can add this to the off-screen chalkboard of good career lessons.
And then what's great is I got her a job at the place that I teach. And so, you know, she has a kid and she's pregnant again. And I know that losing Broadway right now is not helpful for people. And so now I know that at least she's getting some money, and I'm grateful that I was able to sort of be the conduit to make that happen. And, you know, that's just always been my philosophy. My mom taught me at such a young age of like, just treat people how you want to be treated. And not many people live by that philosophy, but there are those people. And that is another answer to your earlier question. Find good people to work with, to create with, to sing your material, to bring life to your work. Because remember, you're creating these babies. You wouldn't just put your child in the hands of anybody. So really make sure that the people you work with are people that you want representing what it is you do.
Now, at this point, I would love to open the floor up to the audience for questions they may have. And I believe Elise has been or will be curating some questions
Cool.
From the back room. So Elise,
yeah, you're welcome to put them in the chat if you like, or you can open up your unmute yourself. We did get a question earlier from Noel Katz, who's knew he was going to have to leave, so he sent his question in advance. So I can tell you that one to get us started. He said, in publishing, authors get advances. Are musical theater writers always forced to toil for no payment prior to ticketed performances?
Well, that's where commissions are helpful. So with Mary and Max, for instance, I actually had to buy the rights. I think they were $5,000 or something. I didn't have $5,000 at all. So we kind of did a deal with the film people that when we got a production, we'd buy the rights. And they were cool with that. They understood, they were great. And so we developed the whole piece, got the offer. We got an advance for the production. That part of that advance was to help get the rights. In this, let's say I had some of my other work. I have this piece called Til Death Do Us that was supposed to have a world premiere in San Diego. When I started writing it, I've been writing it for so long, I've never seen a penny at all. Never, because it was my idea. I started writing it for no producer said, would you please write something for me? So sometimes the answer, which is why when sometimes people approach me and say, hey, would you write the music to this thing that I'm working on? And I have to think, is this worth my time? Because time is money. And I know if I'm not going to get a commission to write it, if I'm just doing it because I'm hoping that it will go somewhere, that's where you have to really start thinking, is this worth my time? There are only 24 hours in the day. So, but the answer is you will get an advance when you're getting a production or when you're getting published. But if you can get commissions, and part of it also, Michael, to answer your earlier question, network, it's my least favorite thing. I'm awful at it. I have social anxiety. I don't drink, so I can't even have a drink before I go to do something. And that is so much how this industry works. It's like who you know and who you're friendly with and who wants to support you. And luckily, I have had some good luck with meeting some really great people that have wanted to support me. Some people have stayed, some people have left. But that's sort of, the way the cookie crumbles or the way it goes.
Even though it's bad form to contradict my guest, I will say that you are not bad at networking.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Here's another question for you, which I'll field while we encourage our visitors to type any questions they might have into the chat window. You've mentioned the choice between doing an original work and a title, a known title. If you look at where this falls in the career of a composer, say someone is young coming out of college, they want to create their first work, would you encourage them to write something entirely original or to look for a property that might get attention? Specifically thinking about someone who's really just emerging out of the scene for the first time.
It's great. It's a really great question. I mean, I can tell you that those TikTok writers of Bridgerton and Ratatouille, I don't know if they would have gotten noticed on TikTok writing something original. So I think those titles and the work is great. I think the Bridgerton stuff is really cool. But I don't know if that was not Bridgerton, if that would be the hot thing that it is right now. So my answer is going to be, I think whatever you feel so passionate about that you have to make sing, that's where you go. That's what you write.
This is a great segue to a question from Ellen in our chat room, which you can see, but she's asking what motivates you to pick a particular property or an idea for development? What is the thing that speaks out to you and says, this has to sing and I want to make it into a musical?
There has to be heart. I've never written a piece that's that's only, what do you call it? Wah, wah. I can't think of what the name is. Like that old style of musical theater, not old style. I can't think of, but it has to have heart. If it's just comedy with no heart and it's just funny, then I just am not, that doesn't work for me. There has to be stakes. Something really important has to be at stake, and there has to be, in my opinion, a hero's journey. Ensemble pieces are hard. And in Mary and Max, one of the things we have to really think about is who's the lead. Whose story are we telling? And we chose Mary. That it's Mary's story that we're going on the journey of, and how Max plays into that, and how every character plays into that. In the stuff that I've been watching lately, there are themes that I'm interested in writing about, things that I think work really well on stage. I love stage magic. Like there's nothing more exciting to me than going to see something that's theatrical, which is, and I'm not putting down Pretty Woman. I had so many friends that worked on it and it was lovely production. But what can you do with Pretty Woman? There's no like supernatural element. There's no fairy, it's just so real. And I love that movie. But for me, something like, okay, I'll tell you what I've been trying to get the rights to, and I've been told no over and over and over again for the last month. Bridge to Terabithia. Family. I would extract the parents and bring them to a bigger role. So go more the Secret Garden route so that it's a little more adult. I would really, I would make the girl African Black. I would make the world that she lives in something that would be surprising to an audience. I would bring more of the world of them creating because it's visual. That world is super visual, and it has death in it. There's a great lesson to be learned from the piece. And there are things that I want to do with it to like it, instead of this is perfect, we should put it as is on stage. That doesn't interest me. So I mentioned Terabithia because I just think it's not going to happen. But it is everything that I'm looking for. Like I would want her when she dies to not leave stage. I would want her to be with him. Like that theatrical stuff that you can't really do in a film, but things you can do in theater.
Now, they don't know your history of being told no when trying to acquire children's property. So it'll be interesting to see if you're able to bludgeon your way into a yes.
We're trying. We are trying. I think I might do the write a song for it. It has also, that has such a great father-son relationship story. And I watched the film the other day and was just weeping, just like, I tell all of my students, as artists, when bad things happen to us, we're eventually going to use it in our work. So at the time, it might not feel super great what's happening, but you will use it. And, I had a really interesting, complicated relationship with my father. And I have found that I use that way more than the beautiful relationship I've always had with my mother. I use the conflict. That's another thing the piece needs to have, conflict. What is the conflict of it? Is that large enough to sustain either an hour and a half through musical, or a full 2-act musical?
I was going to say, it seems like your mother is the quiet hero of your entire biography, based on what we've heard, because she introduced you to musical theater, and she's given you all these words of wisdom that have guided you through your whole life. So I think she deserves a lot of credit. We have time for one more question. Dennis in the chat room asks, can you speak to any songwriters, musical theater writers that have inspired you in addition to Stephen Schwartz? And are there any shows that you found particularly inspiring?
I'm reading it right now. Inspired you. Yes. I love Menken. I love Janine Tesori. David Yazbek writes some really cool stuff. I like people that have their own sound, if that makes sense, that you hear a song and you go, oh, it's them, it's them, it's them. Jason Robert Brown really inspired me to start writing, because I always thought that as a writer, I was just so poppy. And at the time, no one was really doing that. And then along came Jason Robert Brown, and I was like, I can do that. Not his style, but like taking something that's more ear friendly, modern, but using it as the vessel to tell the story. So I love a lot of Jason's like big songs that are in their own like an entire musical. Parade is one of my favorite shows. I just think it is so beautiful. But I also I like Pasek and Paul. I think they write some really great catchy tunes, and I think Dear Evan Hansen is such a beautiful piece of theater. I like that they did something that challenged sort of the norm. And I went to college with Bobby Lopez, so I have to say Bobby Lopez because I think he's fantastic. And he is, I mean, clearly super prolific, but just nice, you know, and I've encountered John Bocchino is another person that I like his style. I like his work. I love his lyrics specifically. And everyone that I've mentioned has been like really, really nice, really helpful. Except for Jason. I've never met him. I've never met Jason Robert Brown. I would love to one day. And but you know, listening to the last 5 years, driving around in my car and just like creating these worlds in my head through these monologue songs, which were very different than songs from, let's say, the 50s or 60s. And I think that is what has changed so much of musical theater, is a bunch of like his style. And that's a style that I really like. I also love Jerry Herman. I love his melodies and his key changes. So
strange thing to compliment. I'm sure he would have appreciated that. Before we wrap, where can people go if they want to follow your future works or just stay in touch with you online?
Cool. I have a website that I can't say I've updated much because there hasn't been too much. That's not true. There's been a lot happening, but nothing on stage. That's bobbycronin.com. I'm on Instagram as Cronin Bobby, which is confusing, but which I tend to use more than anything. And like there's a Linktree thing that sends you to other things that you can see. Like you can see like the trailer for the Austrian production of Mary and Max, just so you can see the world that I was talking about. It's really cool to see. And yeah, that's where you'd find me.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sorry that we don't have more time because there's so much more in your career, and I think we could fill up 3 hours easily without asking you to pause. But for today, thanks so much for sharing your story and telling us what you've been doing and what you have coming up. This has been a real delight, and I wish you every success as the theater world returns to us and you're able to bring your works back to the stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking me to be here. My pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone and those of you who registered because you had to register for today. You know, be on the lookout as we do more of these events in the future. We will let you know that when you can meet more interesting people like Bobby. Thank you so much for your time, Bobby.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.